Hello, my name is Pedro Pina. I'm a VP at Google, and also I'm the executive sponsor of Pride at Google, our global network of LGBT plus employees and allies. And as we like to say at Google, we are built for everyone. No matter where you're from, who you are, or who you love, our platforms bring people closer together. And our commitments continue this year, more than ever, as we strive to find ways to come together virtually. And that's why we're so deeply proud of our partnership with organizations such as the Global Equality Caucus and this incredible initiative, Lawmakers for LGBT plus Equality. This is a unique forum where lawmakers and citizens come from across the world, and they can come together in a powerful way for us to continue to make the change that we need to see in our communities and in our society. And we do know that the starting point for LGBT plus equality is the law, and that we must keep pushing until equal protections and rights are in place for everyone, regardless of their sexuality, gender identity, or expression. So, on behalf of Google, thank you and welcome. Whether you are just participating, you're contributing, or simply watching these discussions, we're excited to play our small part in making this possible.
In many countries around the world, great progress is being made to improve the lives of gay, lesbian, bi, and trans people. But in too many other countries, this simply isn't the case. And people are facing discrimination, even violence in their lives. We have to change this. But in a world where COVID is keeping us apart, we need to find new ways to come together. That's why the Global Equality Caucus is presenting Lawmakers for LGBT plus Equality, so that we can connect civil society, the people who have a voice, with lawmakers and legislators, the people who have a vote. Debate,
connect,
change
for equality.
Hello and welcome to the Lawmakers for LGBT plus Equality series and this, our North America and Caribbean event. This series brings together legislators and civil society leaders to discuss the issues that matter to LGBTQ2 plus communities and to you. My name is Randy Boissonnault and I'm the co-founder and vice chair of the Global Equality Caucus and a former member of Parliament in Canada. I'm thrilled to be your host for this event. La serie Los Legisladores por la Igualdad LGBT+, es presentada por el Global Equality Caucus, una red de representantes electos que luchan por mejorar las leyes para las personas LGBT+ en todo el mundo. Ces événements ne seraient pas possibles sans le soutien de Google et je tiens à remercier chaleureusement toute l'équipe de Google pour tout ce qu'elle a fait pour nous permettre de vous présenter cet événement. On a vu des grands accomplissements dans le monde pour faire progresser l'égalité des gens LGBT+, mais il reste beaucoup à faire. Discriminatory laws in countries across all continents mean that millions of LGBT plus people face prejudice, violence, and death. We need to change that and mobilize lawmakers to tear down existing barriers so that LGBT plus people can live equally under the law. La pandemia global significa que no podemos unirnos en persona para debatir estos temas, pero esta noche podemos conectar a los legisladores electos con representantes de la sociedad civil y con el público. If you are a legislator anywhere in the world and you are an LGBT plus person or an ally and you have not yet joined the Global Equality Caucus, please do so at equalitycaucus.org. We would love to work with you to advance the rights of LGBT plus people in your country and in your region. Tonight, we'll be hosting 3 panel discussions and an interview over the next 90 minutes, all focusing on regional LGBT plus issues. We thank each of you and each of the guests who took the time out of their lives to speak on matters that mean the most to them, experts in the field, activists, and government officials. We are pleased to be offering you this event in 3 different languages: English, French, and Spanish. You can access the language of your choice by choosing the CC icon at the bottom right of your screen. Thank you to all of the interpreters for making this possible. Throughout the night, please share your comments and feedback with us in the chat bar. We've got a busy schedule tonight, so let's get started, and let's begin with important greetings from lawmakers in the region. First, let us turn to greetings from a champion of LGBT plus rights. I served as his special advisor on LGBTQ2 issues. Please welcome the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau.
Hello everyone, bonjour à tous. For starters, I want to thank the Global Equality Caucus for bringing us together today and for their continuous work to advance LGBTQ2 issues and rights around the world. I also want to thank my friend and co-founder of this organization, Randy Boissonnault. As an advocate, legislator, and my special advisor on LGBTQ2 issues, Randy has made a real difference in the lives of so many. So thank you for your commitment and your dedication, my friend. And thank you all for being here today. This is an important event for all of us to show our support for the LGBTQ2 communities. Here in Canada, we know our diversity is our strength, and we're proud to be one of the most open, inclusive countries in the world. Cependant, beaucoup trop de gens sont encore privés de leurs droits les plus fondamentaux simplement à cause de leur orientation sexuelle, de leur identité sexuelle ou de leur expression sexuelle. Et c'est à chacun de nous qu'il appartient de bâtir un monde plus inclusif et plus ouvert. As a government, we're doing our part. Since 2015, our government has been working to combat hate and discrimination against LGBTQ2 people. We've created legislation to protect trans rights and prevent discrimination based on gender identity and gender expression. We offered a formal apology on behalf of the Government of Canada to LGBTQ2 Canadians who've been wronged by federal legislation, policies, and practices. We created a ministry dedicated to diversity and inclusion, and we've made unprecedented investments for the LGBTQ2 community service organizations, both here at home and around the world. My friends, we've come a long way, but there's still so much more work to do. So together, let's keep fighting for rights, protections, and inclusion for all LGBTQ2 people. And let's build a world that is fairer, kinder, and more equal for everyone. Encore une fois, merci pour tout ce que vous faites et prenez soin de vous.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And now we turn to our neighbors from the South. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce to you representatives of the Congressional LGBTQ plus Caucus, Representatives David Cicilline and Mark Takano.
Hi, I'm Congressman David Cicilline. On behalf of the Congressional LGBTQ Equality Caucus, I want to thank you for taking part in the LGBTQ Equality series for North America and the Caribbean. I've been proud to serve as a member of the Global Equality Caucus over the last few years. As someone who worked closely with your leadership in its earliest days, I'm especially proud to see the incredible progress this organization has made. As you know, the last 4 years in the United States were extremely challenging ones for our community. But those days are over. In less than 2 months, the Biden-Harris administration has reestablished the United States as a leading advocate for the rights of LGBTQ plus people here in the United States and around the world. Most importantly, they're working with Congress, not against us, to craft legislation that will advance the goals we all share and build a better future where all people are respected and treated with the dignity they deserve. Thank you for all that you do. I look forward to continuing our work together.
Hello, I'm Congressman Mark Takano from California, and I'm a co-chair of the Equality Caucus in the United States Congress. Thank you for joining the North American and Caribbean edition of Lawmakers for LGBTQ plus Equality, organized by the Global Equality Caucus. Equality should know no borders, and I'm so glad that leaders like you are being champions for this important effort to secure rights and protections for LGBTQ plus people worldwide. In the United States, we have made great strides toward more LGBTQ+ acceptance, and the relentless activism of LGBTQ+ people and allies, past and present, has led us to the passage of the Equality Act in the House of Representatives. Now, having elected the most pro-equality presidential ticket in our nation's history, LGBTQ+ equality in America is within reach. But our efforts don't stop there, which is why I'm proud to support the work that the Global Equality Caucus is doing. We must continue working together to defend the human rights of our community and ensure that every LGBTQ+ person everywhere is safe and treated with dignity and respect. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Ahora es un gran placer para mí presentarles a una ex ministra de la Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación de México. Actualmente es la secretaria de Gobernación del Gobierno de México. Tuve un gran placer de reunirme con la ministra en Ottawa en 2018. Demos la bienvenida a una defensora de las personas LGBT+ y nuestros derechos, la ministra Olga Sánchez Cordero.
Muy buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Agradezco a Randy Boissonnault por la invitación a participar en esta reunión de Global Equality Caucus para América del Norte. Avanzar en la inclusión social y garantizar el derecho de la igualdad implican una común premisa: asumir nuestra diversidad. Estas palabras que retomo del año 2010, cuando en la Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación se tendían los puentes de colaboración en favor de la no discriminación, me hace reflexionar hoy en día sobre lo mucho que hemos avanzado en las vidas, que hemos cambiado, pero que esta lucha contra la discriminación es inacabada. Aún tenemos que abogar por la igualdad entre todas las personas. Todos los seres humanos nacemos libres, pero también iguales. Los derechos son universales, por lo que los actos de violencia y discriminación basados en la orientación sexual o identidad de género son inaceptables, incorrectos. Ejerzamos una acción política y legislativa coordinada y que en este mundo interconectado pongamos terminantemente fin a la discriminación y a la violencia. Por último, dando lo mejor de nosotros, con acciones y compromisos que conduzcan hacia un porvenir en donde ninguna persona vuelva a ser invisibilizada, violentada ni discriminada. Muchas gracias.
Gobierno de México.
And now for greetings from the Caribbean, I would like to welcome Senator Aziza from Antigua and Barbuda.
On behalf of LGBT plus persons and ally legislators in governments and parliaments throughout the Caribbean, I welcome you to the North America and Caribbean event in Lawmakers for LGBT plus Equality series, brought to us by the Global Equality Caucus and supported by Google. My name is Aziza Lake, and I'm a senator in Antigua and Barbuda. I'm a proud member of the Global Equality Caucus. LGBT plus rights are human rights, and we all have a duty to ensure that everyone, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, ethnicity, religion, or status in life, can enjoy human rights. While progress has been made in our region, there's much more to do. With the collaboration of allies in governments in the Caribbean and our partners in civil society, we can and will continue to make positive change happen. I thank you for joining and hope that you enjoy the rest of this event in the Lawmakers for LGBT plus Equality series.
No event of this scale can take place without key partners that help put all the pieces together and find outstanding people with whom to have great conversations. I would like to thank the Victory Institute for their support, and let's turn now to some of the leaders of the Victory Institute.
Welcome. My name is Ruben Gonzalez, and I'm the Executive Director of the LGBTQ Victory Institute. We're a Washington, D.C. based organization that works to increase the political participation of LGBTQ people around the world. We're excited to partner with the Global Equality Caucus for this event that gathers LGBTQ lawmakers and leaders from all around North America. We're excited to see the conversations and ideas that emerge from these important discussions. Thank you for joining us today.
Bienvenue. Je m'appelle Alélie Partida, je suis la directrice des programmes internationaux de Victory Institute. Nous sommes une organisation basée à Washington, D.C., dont l'objectif est d'augmenter la participation politique des personnes LGBTI dans le monde. Nous sommes heureux de nous associer au Global Equality Caucus pour cet événement qui rassemble des législateurs et des dirigeants LGBTI de toute l'Amérique du Nord. Et nous sommes impatients d'entendre les idées qui émergeront de ces importantes discussions. Merci de nous accompagner.
Bienvenidas y bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Mateo de la Torre. Soy manager de los programas internacionales del Victory Institute. Somos una organización de sede en Washington, D.C., que trabaja para aumentar la participación política de las personas LGBTI de todo el mundo. Estamos felices de asociarnos con el Global Equality Caucus para este evento que reúne a legisladores y liderazgos LGBTI de toda América del Norte. Y estamos ansiosos por ver las conversaciones e ideas que surgen de estas importantes discusiones. Gracias por acompañarnos.
It's also important to thank our leaders in the civil society movement and those who help us put this event together. Now let's turn to Stephen Seaborn, co-chair of ILGA North America and Caribbean.
Hi there. ILGA North America and the Caribbean is connected directly to 1,600 organizations in 153 countries. We work together to decriminalize same-sex relations, to end violence and discrimination at all levels of society. And in North America and the Caribbean, we work directly with regional bodies such as CARIFLAGS, with the OAS, and with global bodies like the Commonwealth Equality Network, and with UN bodies. Why? Well, over 1/2 of all LGBTQ folks in the US are not protected by state laws. Extreme anti-sodomy laws introduced across the British Empire still exist in the Caribbean, and perhaps surprisingly, although in Canada we can marry, there are still 7 homophobic acts of parliament on the books. More at ilga.org. Thanks.
Now let's turn to our first panel of the evening. This is a panel that will focus on issues related to trans rights in the region. It is moderated by Emmett Lamache, who is the Executive Director of the Enchanté Network in Canada. Have a listen.
Hello, I'm Representative Stephanie Byers. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I serve in the Kansas House of Representatives for the 86th District. As we look forward to this panel and being able to be a part of this international group, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak a little bit. Here in the United States, the transgender community is currently under threat. We have over 80 bills being presented in various state legislatures that will attack mostly trans youth. And I stand here in Kansas and try my best to defend that and keep that from happening, because we understand that affirmation lifts people up. And when we put restrictions in place, it puts people into positions where they may decide that this is not the best place for them to live, or maybe even not to live at all. And we don't want that to happen to anyone. We're hopeful that the Equality Act here in the United States will pass. It's passed our House. It needs to come to our US Senate, and hopefully we'll get the votes that it needs there to become a reality and add those protections for people regardless of their gender identity, regardless of sexual orientation, so that we all walk the streets with the same equal rights as everyone else in the United States. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I hope you enjoy what presentations we have for you.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Emmett Lamache, j'utilise tous les pronoms et je suis le directeur général du réseau Enchanté. Je m'identifie comme une personne trans et je suis un franco-albertain très fier. Je suis très heureux d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui en tant que modérateur. Il me fait plaisir d'être joint par mes collègues Temistocles Villanueva de Diputado, Mexique, Kenia Cuevas founder Casa de la Muñecas, Mexique, et Alexa Hoffman, former chair of the United Caribbean Trans Network, Barbados. Je tiens à souligner que je vis sur le territoire ancestral des peuples Cri, Dene, Pieds-Noirs, Saulteaux, Nakota-Sioux et Métis. Je reconnais que ce territoire fait partie de la signature du traité 6 de 1876 et que les peuples autochtones y ont vécu avant nous et y vivent toujours aujourd'hui, contribuant à l'enrichissement de notre culture et nos vies. Le Réseau Enchanté est un réseau national qui relie et soutient les centres de fierté et d'autres organisations offrant des services et des programmes aux personnes deux esprits et LGBTQ+, à travers le Canada. Nous soutenons la capacité organisationnelle et collaborative de nos membres, qui sont des fournisseurs de services de première ligne d'ES LGBTQ+, et nous favorisons également un environnement où la collaboration et le réseautage peuvent s'épanouir. Une des raisons d'être du Réseau Enchanté est de créer de la visibilité et défendre les intérêts de nos organismes pourvoyeurs de services de première ligne. Puisque nous n'avons pas d'organisme national trans au Canada, le Réseau Enchanté prend un rôle de leadership pour la représentation et le soutien des personnes trans. Malgré les efforts, nous avons encore un long chemin devant nous pour revendiquer les droits des personnes trans. Par exemple, un problème majeur auquel nous faisons souvent face au Canada est que les droits et revendications des personnes de diversité de genre passent par les départements de défense des droits de la femme. Cela apporte des tensions non seulement au niveau individuel, mais aussi au sein de l'institution même. Juste hier, j'ai fait partie d'un panel national LGBT+, lors d'une conférence sur la relance post-COVID féministe, et nous avons eu des féministes anti-trans qui ont passé plusieurs commentaires transphobes. Ceci peut sembler comme une situation unique ou anodine, mais elle représente une barrière systémique ancrée dans le langage utilisé par les départements fédéraux censés nous supporter. On this, I would now like to invite Temi to talk about the current context in your country. Temis, the floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias. Muy buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Es un verdadero honor poder participar en este Global Equality Caucus. Yo hablaré desde la perspectiva que me corresponde como legislador, como diputado local de la Ciudad de México, una ciudad capital del país donde existen avances significativos en el reconocimiento de derechos a la población LGBTTI. Sin embargo, capital de un país aún muy conservador, con grandes rezagos, que encabeza cada año, por desgracia, dentro de los 3 países con mayor cantidad de crímenes de odio por LGBTI-fobias, homofobia, bifobia, lesbofobia, transfobia, y al mismo tiempo con legislaciones dispares por el marco jurídico de nuestro país. Existen en más de la mitad de las entidades de la República reconocimiento al matrimonio igualitario. La Ciudad de México fue la primera en dar este avance desde el año 2009 y el trabajo que ha realizado el Poder Judicial, la Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación, ha permitido el avance cada vez más consistente en este derecho. Tenemos pendiente en la Ciudad de México el reconocimiento de identidad de género, el cambio de identidad de género en acta de nacimiento a personas menores de 18 años, a pesar de que desde el año 2009 existe a través de la ruta jurisdiccional, a partir de 2014 es un proceso administrativo, pero uno de los grandes requisitos para cualquier persona poder cambiar su identidad de género es tener más de 18 años, tener la mayoría de edad, tener el derecho a la ciudadanía, como si un derecho humano como el derecho a la identidad fuera un derecho político que se adquiere con la mayoría de edad. En el trabajo legislativo que realizamos día a día hemos descubierto que hay una gran crisis cultural por la ausencia de políticas públicas que permitan cambiar la forma en la que se percibe a la diversidad sexual. La sexualidad es uno de estos grandes tabús.
Gracias, perdón.
Gracias.
Sí, gracias. I would like to now invite Kenya to talk about the current context in your country. Kenya, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Kenia Cuevas y soy directora general de Casa de las Muñecas Tiresias y también directora del primer albergue para mujeres trans. Y bueno, en las organizaciones civiles en México hemos atendido problemáticas estructurales que se encuentra enfrascada la comunidad LGBT, principalmente por las personas trans que vivimos una criminalización por el simple hecho de expresar lo que queremos ser y nuestra identidad de género, ¿no? Aunque tenemos muchos avances en el reconocimiento de identidad, en los derechos de seguridad social, en el en el matrimonio igualitario, hace falta un avance muy importante para poder coadyuvar con las instituciones y garantizar los derechos que todavía se impugnan, no por el simple hecho de ser una persona LGBT, sino generar que se garanticen estos derechos a partir de las leyes que se están generando, que se están aprobando, pero también impulsar acciones que nos lleven a concretar realmente un proceso de acompañamiento para las poblaciones que han sido abandonadas históricamente en nuestro país. En nuestro país existe un machismo radical, el cual sigue prevaleciendo a pesar de los avances que se han tenido en esta última década, pero la sociedad civil ha tenido un papel muy importante en el reconocimiento de estas expresiones y también en el reconocimiento de los derechos humanos que no son negociables, ¿no? Y que eso en nuestro país todavía no es entendible. Las instituciones tenemos que organizar protocolos de actuación, pero que sean integrales y que sean realmente protocolos que no embarguen, ¿no? El sentido común de los funcionarios públicos para poder atender la problemática.
Muchas gracias, Kenia. I would now like to invite Alexa to talk about the current context in your country. Alexa, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. With regards to the context of basically the state of affairs in Barbados, while there have been some advances made in the way of acknowledging the human rights of lesbian, gay, and bisexual people, there's still work to be done as it relates to acknowledging the human rights of trans people, more specifically in terms of acknowledging the right to health care, in terms of having a more widespread, tailor-made, how should I put it, health sensitivity that suits the needs of trans people, going all the way down to employment protections, ensuring that individuals are not terminated or suspended or otherwise disciplined at their job on the grounds of their gender identity. So for now, that's just a bit of the tip of the iceberg. And I guess as time goes along, we'll have the opportunity to go in better detail.
All right, thank you, Alexa. Let's just jump right into the questions round. I would like to invite Alexa once again, close the previous version. Now you're coming in first in this round. How can civil society better work with legislators to protect trans people? Go ahead.
Well, in terms of civil society working with legislators, that's a very funny question, especially from my experience, what I've observed on the landscape, because in a lot of cases, those who are within the legislature, they just figure that the civil society organizations must seek them out. But in terms of the legislators themselves, whether they're congressmen, members of parliament, senators, in terms of them taking the time to say, you know what, let me educate myself, let me go out there and interact with people, not much of that is going on. So really the civil society / legislature thing has to be a two-way street where yes, the CSOs are prepared to educate, but also the legislators are prepared to be educated to begin with.
Thank you very much, Alexa. Kenia, ¿cómo pueden la sociedad civil y los gobiernos mantener seguras a las personas trans en la región? Your turn.
Bueno, yo considero desde mi perspectiva y desde mi acompañamiento que brindo que sigamos generando espacios lejos de la violencia, donde podamos profesionalizar a las mujeres, porque hay un rezago educativo para la comunidad LGBT por la falta de oportunidades y los derechos violentados. Tenemos que acompañar también psicológicamente para poder proyectar un proyecto de vida a corto, mediano y largo plazo de estas personas, y más si se encuentran en una situación de vulnerabilidad, ¿no? Y también los procesos psicológicos que podemos conllevar con un proyecto integral donde acompañemos a las personas LGBT a cualquier proceso, al derecho a la educación, a la identidad, al derecho a la vivienda, al derecho a la educación, al trabajo, o sea, a todos los derechos, pero que sea acompañado por el gobierno y que también exista prevención sobre la violencia que se genera estructural y sistemática con la comunidad LGBT. Tenemos que generar también un impacto en medios de comunicación, así como mencionan, que las mamás violentadas y que hay acciones que se pueden realizar, que asimismo también se pueda generar esta información en la televisión, en el radio, en medios digitales, ¿no? En esta era digital que ahora es muy importante, y que podamos generar tanto información oportuna para poder prevenir el delito y la violencia, pero también generar espacios donde no exista violencia y que pueda ser incluyente para la comunidad, pero también integral a modo de atender todas sus necesidades que fueron abandonadas a través de la discriminación y la violencia que se ejerce hacia la población. Y también la criminalización que se ejerce en el ámbito laboral y que no se nos permite también ocupar esos espacios públicos y también laborales por ser con nuestra expresión de género. Entonces también generar un impacto a través de la Secretaría de Trabajo para poder generar un impulso laboral integral y efectivo.
Muchas gracias, Kenya. Back to you again, Alexa. Another question: what is the one thing you would like to see changed for trans people in the United States? Sorry, not in the United States, in the Caribbean. Go ahead.
Well, for sure, one thing that I'd like to see change is a greater understanding, greater sensitivity, because as it stands in the region, there is a very poor understanding of what it is to be trans and what the experiences of trans people entail. And with that come all of the hurdles as we try to get a step closer, step after step, to having trans people being seen and understood as being just like anyone else that you will meet. So what I'd like to see change is the level of education, the level of understanding on trans issues, and then in turn, a greater understanding by the laws themselves in that they treat trans people as not being some mere anomaly or some freak of nature, for lack of better words, but as actual individuals who would have had, you know, a history, a collective history of marginalization, and that the laws wish to chip away at that marginalization. And I don't want to necessarily say level the playing field, but to put the adequate and requisite resources in place that everyone, trans and otherwise, can enjoy a quality of life that isn't marked by the fact of, oh, this person is trans versus, oh, this person is cis.
Excellent points. Thank you very much, Alexa. Temístocles, ¿cómo pueden los legisladores LGBT mejorar la vida de las personas trans?
Bueno, yo quisiera decirte que Kenia mencionó algo muy importante, y es el trabajo que la sociedad civil, que la ciudadanía de manera organizada ha construido en nuestra ciudad y en nuestro país. Y me parece que eso es lo más importante, que los legisladores trabajemos de la mano con las organizaciones, con los activistas, que los escuchemos y que realmente seamos su voz en el Congreso. Esa es la meta que yo me he puesto como diputado desde hace 2 años y medio que fui nombrado. Actualmente, de hecho, estoy trabajando con el equipo de Kenia y con ella misma una reforma al Código Penal para tipificar como crímenes de odio los transfeminicidios, que por desgracia son un fenómeno que continuamos viviendo en nuestro país. De la misma forma, a través de diversas organizaciones como YAG, con Iván Tagle, trabajamos la prohibición de las mal llamadas terapias de conversión, estos ejercicios que buscan que las personas gays dejen de ser gays, que las personas trans eliminen esta condición como si se tratara de una elección. Y por otra parte, las mesas de trabajo con la ciudadanía han enriquecido el diálogo, no solamente de los legisladores que nos asumimos como parte de la comunidad LGBTI, También hemos logrado educar a más legisladores que no necesariamente tienen una visión progresista, que también son conservadores pero por desconocimiento. Finalmente, yo creo que el trabajo legislativo logra transformaciones jurídicas que impactan en lo cultural. Eso es lo más significativo del trabajo legislativo con una perspectiva de derechos humanos y de igualdad de género. Es el primer paso, pero debe de ir acompañado con políticas públicas establecidas por el Estado para que la educación forme nuevas generaciones que dejen de discriminar, que comprendan que esta es una actitud que no representa una sociedad sana, que no representa libertad, que no representa respeto. Ese es el camino que hemos emprendido en la Ciudad de México y que de cierta forma ha ido contagiando al resto de nuestro país.
Muchas gracias, Temistocles. On that note, I just want to extend a really warm thank you to the Global Equality Caucus for organizing, my English is tough today, this panel, as well as all the panelists, Temistocles Villanueva from Diputado Mexic, Kenia Cuevas, the founder of Casa de las Muñecas, o Mexic, and Alexa Hoffman, former chair of the United Caribbean Trans Network in Barbados. One of the things that I know I would love to see in Canada is increased collaboration between the governmental entities and the CSOs working on the field, on the ground, directly with community members. I think what's really important to remember is nothing should be done about us without us. And if we don't have legislators or politicians who live with the identity that we have, then they should bring people to the table who do have that identity so that they can talk about their own identity without judgment and by being able to present the reality of what it is to live with that particular identity. If there's one thing I want people to take from this, is nothing about us without us. And on behalf of the Enchanté Network, I want to thank you who has taken time out of your day to listen to this important conversation and all the important presentations brought on this panel. And thank you very much.
C'est maintenant pour moi un grand honneur de vous partager des mots de bienvenue et de solidarité du caucus canadien, du caucus mondial pour l'égalité. Now, please welcome some members of the Canadian Parliament who are members of the Global Equality Caucus for their greetings this evening.
Bonjour. Depuis la décriminalisation partielle de l'homosexualité en 1969 et la reconnaissance du mariage civil entre personnes de même sexe en 2005, jusqu'au projet de loi visant l'interdiction des thérapies de conversion actuellement à l'étude au Parlement canadien, le Canada a franchi des étapes importantes pour assurer la reconnaissance des droits de la communauté LGBTQ2+. This progress is due to the work of dedicated lawmakers from all parties. But it is also the result of the many struggles led by citizens and the unwavering commitment of civil society organizations which have been working for decades to ensure the equality and dignity of LGBT+ citizens. On the international stage, the Global Equality Caucus plays a crucial role in bringing together lawmakers and civil society organizations. As a Canadian, I'm very proud to be a member of this great network. Thank you for your tremendous work. I now turn the floor over to my fellow parliamentarians.
Hi, I'm Kim Pei, proud to be a lesbian senator in Canada and sending solidarity to our Global Equality Caucus. We're in this together.
Congratulations, Global Equality Caucus. Senator Mary Lou McPhedran here. We're changing the world.
My name is Eric Duncan, Member of Parliament for the riding of Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry in Eastern Ontario. I want to congratulate and thank the Global Equality Caucus for your continued leadership and work. We are proud of you and for the difference you're making around the world. Keep it up.
I'm Seamus O'Regan, Canada's Minister of Natural Resources, wishing nothing but the best to our Global Equality Caucus. Because everyone deserves to be free to be who they are, free to love who they choose.
I'm Rob Oliphant, Member of Parliament for Don Valley West in the Canadian House of Commons, and I want to wish all our colleagues in the Global Equality Caucus the very best. We're in this together.
Now, I would like us to turn to the interview on ending violence and discrimination against LGBT+ people in the region with Senator Aziza Lake, Caleb Orozco, and Kenita Placide.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this interview on ending violence and discrimination. My name is Aziza, and I'm a senator in Antigua and Barbuda. I'm joined today by Caleb Orozco, the founder of Unibam Belize, and Kenita Placide of the Eastern Caribbean Alliance for Diversity and Equality in St. Lucia. Before we begin, I would like to say that there's a lot of work to be done in Antigua and Barbuda and the wider Caribbean in regards to ending violence and discrimination, as well as advocacy for the LGBT community. Caleb and Kenita are doing great work, and we applaud them. Now, turning to our first guest, Caleb Orozco. Caleb, when the Catholic Church came out against you in regards to the anti-sodomy case, you were quoted in saying, "My human rights is total. It's not to be mandated by the church because the church does not govern this country. Period." How can lawmakers and civil society secure the human rights of LGBT plus in countries where religion remains a powerful force against change?
Lawmakers have the opportunity to be champions and coordinate political dialogue among their peers in Parliament. The first part of reducing resistance is promoting understanding. Lawmakers have an opportunity to set the model of what inclusive governance looks like. And that means in its planning and reform process, in the way it allocates budgets to health, employment, education. And that means that there's an important part of that to include in representation in planning and development. And lastly, lawmakers have an ability to facilitate dialogue bridging LGBT concerns with church leaders by putting both parties around the table, promoting dialogue and discussion to establish what they have in common, not what is different.
Thank you, Caleb, for that informative answer. We appreciate your bravery in your advocacy work in Belize and the region. Now, Kenita, you have brought LGBT plus issues to the forefront in St. Lucia and throughout the Anglo-Caribbean and international community. How has the perception of LGBT plus people changed from the perspective in regards to violence and discrimination, if it has changed at all?
Thank you so very much for that question. I think it's important to understand the steps that we have taken in some of the process, the journey, the history of the work that we have done. Being able to work with the LGBT community, just to be comfortable, to have freedom of expression, to understand their rights, to understand just even the terminologies that are being used to address them, where sometimes they just see themselves as being individuals with different expressions. Where we see what we have seen and where we have seen change is the factor that conversations are continuous at the moment in this region, compared to looking at a decade ago where it was more of a taboo conversation. So we have seen a lot of development, and we can even say thank you to persons like Caleb Orozco in Belize being in the forefront of his case as an openly gay man, what that has done in terms of persons feeling free to be able to identify as themselves, to being able to say, challenge their family, challenge the status quo. But I think when we think about the development in the Caribbean, being a highly religious society, we kind of step back many a time. So we do 5 steps forward of development and 20 steps back of let's go back in the closet, let's get things back to where they were. So yes, in my perspective, in terms of over a decade and a half of doing this work and seeing the development, I could say we have really moved the needle, but at the same time, I would say not sufficiently. There is still so much work to be done, and that's the part that we right now are looking at. What's the next steps? What's impact? What's effective? What's efficient? And more importantly, how has that improved the rights to access and justice overall for a meaningful life of a citizen.
Great points, Kenita. We thank you. And we appreciate the context you provided. Back to you, Caleb. What should lawmakers in the region focus on to prevent future discrimination and violence against LGBT plus people?
Lawmakers have the responsibility to recognize the positive contributions LGBT people make to the economy of the region or at the national level. In the Caribbean, there's a collective GDP of $89 billion. And of that, one can estimate that there's 1.4 million LGBT people contributing to that process. That cannot be ignored if we're talking about inclusive growth, inclusive investments. In that regard, lawmakers have an important role to play in encouraging economic data collection, and that is absent from this discussion. If we know the word of our citizens, we know the word of the governance. The second important point in this conversation is recognizing that as a region, our civil rights and protection mechanism is weak. They have a responsibility to strengthen that process to ensure that the rights enforcement protection mechanism that exists in the region or at the national level is accessible to all. Where inclusive justice is reflective of the commitments like the Sustainable Development Goal, lawmakers are giving life to the idea that they're truly leaving no one behind. And lastly, when we talk about what lawmakers can do, lawmakers must recognize that they are there to serve the people, all the people, not just some of the people, and that their constitution require them to address the inequity of citizens based on social and economic disparity. They are required, they are not asked. And in that regard, that they cannot absolve themselves of responsibility that the safety and security of citizens is not just for one group of people, it's for the entire country, and they are there to serve the development issues that those citizens need. Punto final.
Thank you very much for your perspective, Caleb. Finally, Kenita, which tools do you believe work best for civil societies trying to stop violence and discrimination against LGBT plus people in our region?
This is an interesting point because I think it comes into play in talking about what exactly is civil society doing and how is greater impact being met. And I think when we look at the tools we use, what two most effective tools that we have gotten from the HIV pandemic, which taught us a lot about how to reach different aspects, multi-sectorial approaches, bringing stakeholders to the table, mobilizing. We also think about what is most important to the communities that we are actually serving. So in that light, I think two aspects really stands out in terms of civil society drive to sensitizing different layers of society. You know, doing that education is important. One of the things during that education that is the additional layer is actually the storytelling. How do you understand the issues, the violence, the discrimination that a subset of your citizenry actually face if you don't hear those stories, if you don't see the impact of what the cause and effect is? And bringing those, being able to do the sensitization, being able to capture the horrors that happens when discrimination and stigma happens, far less when violence happens. I think these are the kind of things that actually touch hearts and minds that they are causing harm. And when we look at the work as civil society, even if we are not doctors, something most of us have actually sworn is to do no further harm. So everything that we do is trying to create that environment that allows citizens to contribute and be citizens in a way that they do not have to feel less of a citizen in the matter of how policy laws are formed or actually served.
Lawmakers must recognize that whether it's governance and civil society must recognize whether it's advocacy, that each exists in a singular foundation, and that is their action is a trauma-informed approach to our citizenship. Whether violence or whether policy, a trauma-informed approach provides the healing necessary to create stable and secure environments for people to live. In that regard, we cannot lose our humanity in governance or in our advocacy intervention, because at the end of the day, we lose the soul of a country when we decide to be complicit by indifference, omission, and action in allowing violence to take place without any accountable action. And I leave it there.
There's much to be done, and we thank you for your work. Thank you to everyone for joining us. The fight against violence and discrimination is a long and arduous process, but when we work together, the impact is great. Thank you to the Global Equality Caucus for creating this series, Lawmakers for LGBT plus Equality. Caleb Orozco and Kenita Placide, thank you both for your leadership in pushing for LGBT plus equality. I know that our work is not done, and we support you. Up next is a panel featuring the voices of Two-Spirit and Indigenous LGBT plus persons. Please enjoy.
Hello, I'm Representative Stephanie Byers, she, her, hers. I represent the 86th District in the Kansas House of Representatives in the United States. I'm a member of the Chickasaw Nation here in the United States. And here in the US, we have a great variety of people that identify as LGBT, including members of the Two-Spirit community, which exists within our Native American communities. I'm joined today by several different guests, and I would like to introduce to you Keith McCready from Canada. Keith?
Hi, Chimigwech. My name is Keith McCready. I'm the Executive Director at Two-Spirited People of the First Nations in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'm an Ojibwe Cree man from a place called Beach-Twabek, Zalgin, and Anishinaabe, and I do not have any preferred pronouns. In Canada, there's a lot of Two-Spirited people. We know this. We celebrate them. We share with them, and we have met a lot of them through our agency, but we also know that there's a lot of people who we haven't met and reached because we lack the organization and the resources for the communities. We also know that the Two-Spirit community are overrepresented in all social determinants of health that include things like suicide, incarceration, HIV, AIDS, child welfare, diabetes, homelessness, people who use drugs, including murdered and missing Indigenous women. Two-Spirit people are going murdered and missing at an alarming rate here in Canada. We also know that there's a lot of stigma and discrimination still within our own community and the non-Indigenous community. So we have a lot of work to do as far as reclaiming our place in a circle. We believe Two-Spirited people are a valuable part of the medicine wheel here in Canada, and we know that with our own, working together with our own people, walking alongside each other, we could change that. There's also a disconnect for youth that live in isolated rural areas. They have no resources, no access to elders or traditions, and are left behind without anything, and then end up relocating to larger cities and aren't prepared for what that could look like.
Thank you, Keith. We'll now turn to Ifashina Efenyeme and let her make their introductions.
Mabuga Witramaweu, good afternoon and greetings in my native language, which is Garifuna. It is one of the ethnic groups of Belize. We are originally occupied by the Mayas, and there are 3 groups of Mayas that are in Belize, still existing in Belize. We have the Yucatec, the Mopan, and the Quechua Maya. But I am Garifuna. And the Garinago came to Belize in 1802. We were exiled first from St. Vincent, which is our homeland. That is where the hybridization took place and the formation of the culture and people that are Garinago. It is a combination of Africans, Kalinagos, and Arawaks. And we were exiled because we engaged in warfare against the British who were invading our land. And so eventually we were exiled by them so that they could have control of St. Vincent, and they left us on Roatan Island off the coast of Honduras. It is from there that my ancestors migrated to several communities, establishing several communities along the coast of Central America, from Honduras to Nicaragua, Guatemala, and of course, Belize. I am in Dangriga, which is one of the largest Garifuna communities in my country. And as it relates to LGBT persons and issues, I am the co-founder and president of the Productive Organization for Women in Action, POWA, Obafo in Garifuna. And this organization was established because we were looking at the feminization of HIV and AIDS in our country, and particularly in our area of the country. And most of our members are actually Garifuna, because we are in this community that is primarily a Garifuna community. And the reason why we have been able to serve not just Garifuna people, but other peoples of our country and indigenous peoples of the South, because most of our people are in the South, is because Garifuna people are open and welcoming. And we don't know much about discrimination until we were imposed with Christianity. Organized religion is what has caused us to become more discriminatory. And so one of the things that was done to discourage our organization was actually accusing everybody in the organization of being lesbian. And some women were assaulted by partners or discouraged from joining POWA because they were being labeled as lesbian. So it was a way to basically discredit women organizing by being discriminatory against them based on sexual orientation. Yes, we did have lesbian members. In fact, I was openly lesbian and with a partner at the time, going to activities and marching and doing the advocacy, but it did not stop us from strengthening our cause as an organization. And so since 2003 to now, we are still going strong. Obafo.
Thank you, Vashna. Our next panelist is Felina Santiago from Mexico. Felina, will you talk to us a little bit about your culture?
Buenas tardes a todos, a todas. Gracias por la invitación. Yo soy Felina Santiago Valdivieso y me encuentro en el sur de México, en Juchitán, Oaxaca. Pues hace 45 años nació el grupo de las auténticas intrépidas buscadoras del peligro. Es un grupo de mujeres que empezaron a luchar para la visibilidad de las mujeres en nuestra región del Istmo. Hoy en día las mujeres trabajamos en salud sexual, VIH, SIDA y derechos humanos, pero tenemos también muchos problemas todavía en el área de salud, en el área de educación y en el aspecto también de la discriminación, la transfobia, la homofobia, que a pesar de que nosotras vivimos en una zona en donde nosotras convivimos con toda la sociedad, que somos parte de la sociedad, que tenemos una aceptación muy profunda con nuestra sociedad zapoteca, Juchitán no es el paraíso mush. Tan es así que han habido casos de asesinatos y casos de discriminación a los alrededores. Es un caso muy curioso que en Juchitán haya tanta aceptación hacia las personas mushes debido al trabajo que desempeñamos. Pero si vamos a otra población de 10 minutos, 15 minutos, la vida de las mushes ya es muy diferente. Entonces, Juchitán se caracteriza por ser este pueblo solidario, pero pues como les decía, tampoco es el paraíso. Yo siempre he pensado que mientras haya ignorancia, la discriminación va a existir en cualquier rincón del mundo. Nosotras luchamos día a día para poder sobrellevar esta situación con nuestras compañeras en los últimos años, que en México pues la violencia hacia todo tipo de persona ha subido de nivel y nosotras las mujeres no somos la excepción. Las mujeres tenemos un lugar, se puede decir, de privilegio a diferentes de otras zonas, porque en toda la historia de la cultura zapoteca siempre hemos participado en diferentes áreas, en el aspecto religioso, en el aspecto político y en muchos otros lugares en donde son áreas exclusivas de mujeres o áreas exclusivas de hombres, pero que nosotras tenemos esa libertad de entrar en esas dos áreas. Nosotras aquí en Juchitán, nuestros padres, antes de que nosotras estemos enteradas de lo que somos, de que somos personas de dos espíritus, de que nosotras no somos ni hombre ni mujer, somos simplemente mujeres. Antes de nosotras saber eso, cuando tenemos 3, 4 años, 5 años, en el caminar, en el hablar, todos los demás ya saben que somos mujeres. La prima, la hermana, la tía ya sabe que somos mujeres. Esto es un descubrimiento colectivo acá, no es un descubrimiento individual.
Thank you. Our next question is for Ifashina. How can legislators and civil society work together to support Indigenous LGBT people in your area and your region?
This is actually already happening. I think that as long as legislators respect the fact that we are a part of the citizenry, we are a part of the population, and the laws that exist impact us, we're taxpayers, then we have to be included. It cannot be that the laws will be made and we don't have a say. So, for example, we are a big part of advocating for the Equal Opportunities Bill, for example, even though it has been challenged by the churches and is on a standstill. It hasn't been passed as yet, but we are still in that advocacy process to ensure that a bill like that guarantees us our fundamental right of freedom from discrimination, regardless of our ethnicity, regardless of our sexual orientation, regardless of our sex, that is put in place so that we are protected. So when we fight as an organization, even though we do not identify as an LGBT organization specifically, but we know that in the service to our community, we have members that are LGBT and we are Indigenous at the same time. We know that intersectionally, we face this discrimination from so many different angles, for being women, for being Garifuna, for being LGBT, for being poor, for being not fully educated or aligning to a particular political party. We're affected by so many of the protected areas under the bill. So it is things like that we want to ensure we are engaged in. So talking to our area representative, for example, that person that represents us in the House of Representatives as a legislator, that is one of the things that we definitely are willing and have been engaged in doing. If we have to write a letter, if we have to go to the capital to meet the Prime Minister or to even have a parade, a march, a demonstration, we are ready to do that. We have done that and we will continue to do so, because at the end of the day, we call ourselves human rights defenders. And so we will stand up in any fora to ensure that human rights are respected and defended to the end.
Excellent, very good. Felina, how can the LGBT legislators improve the lives of the Mushe people and protect their rights in your region?
Bueno, pues pienso que es importante que día a día la gente, las personas adecuadas para hacer política para la comunidad Mushe, que en un tiempo estuvo muy olvidado, hoy en día apenas se abre esta puerta en donde se está legislando y se está haciendo proyectos para las comunidades indígenas. El problema que tuvimos en una generación pasada con las Mushes, que desertaron, dejaron de ir a la escuela por su aspecto femenino y porque les hacían bullying y que no podían ir como quisieran ir a la escuela vestida de la manera que ellas querían. Entonces, por esa situación, dejaron de asistir a la escuela y muchos se dedicaron a otras actividades. Hoy en día se está legislando a favor para que la comunidad Mushe pueda ir como quiera a la escuela, como es su forma de ser, sin ser discriminado y sin ser rechazado. Para mí es importante que nosotras estemos asomadas en la política porque ahí se hace todas las políticas públicas para todas las personas y para nosotras es muy necesario.
Thank you very much. And Keith, the same question to you. How can civil society and legislators work to advance the rights and amplify the voices of the Two-Spirit people in the region?
Well, I've been working, in leadership, as they call it, for a while. And what I've witnessed is there's not a lot of, accepting, acknowledging, and taking ownership of the violence and trauma that Two-Spirit Indigenous people have had in Canada. So the first thing to do is, accept that this has happened in the past, and acknowledge it, and understand that there's a long way to go for healing for Two-Spirit people. Also accept the existence of gender diverse people, of two-spirited people, that this umbrella term of two-spirited wasn't created by Indigenous people, yet now there's people who identify as part of this 2S LGBT spectrum, and that's their truth, and that's what they know. There's also people who identify as two-spirit a gender identity. Two-spirited is my gender identity. And then lastly, we know that it's a traditional role. And, that's where I really would love to focus on that, this role exists, and we need to let people in Canada know that through the education system, that Two-Spirit is a traditional role. It's part of the circle of Indigenous people. Give people at a young age the resources and access to information about us. So it'll make things much more easier as they get older to understand why two-spirited people are represented this way, or maybe looking at two-spirited people in a very different way, in a more positive way, and understanding how we could walk beside each other. There's lack of resources, there's lack of representation. Two-spirit people need to see themselves in government, in decision making, and as a society, we all own some of that. And also that two-spirited people need to be connected in a very meaningful way to have their voices elevated. Recently in Canada, there's a new organization called Two-Spirit in Motion that's going to attempt to kind of connect two-spirited people all over Canada. And I look forward to what that has to do. But there's still a lot more needed. I mean, considering the amount of people in Toronto, part of a study I did was that 1 in 4 Indigenous families were led by two-spirited people. Why isn't there a two-spirited child and family program? Why isn't there two-spirited specific housing? We know that all housing providers have issues with gender identity and not knowing where people belong, or not understanding that there's going to be different needs. I think we know that there's all these Indigenous two-spirit specific issues we need to deal with, and I think it's taking responsibility and allowing the self-determination of two-spirit Indigenous people to make those decisions. Give them the resources, give us the money, walk beside us, help us have opportunities to make decisions, let us make decisions, and support people who are looking to make change in government, and including people who want to be part of this structured government. Also knowing that the systems that we have in Canada weren't meant for Indigenous people. It was not meant for us to thrive. You have to acknowledge that. You have to change. And if we don't change, nothing's going to change. So we have to do things differently. And the other thing I think leaders need to accept is that they're failing. They weren't doing what they're supposed to do all along. And so you need to do something different. And I think it's listening to the voices of the people who know what they need. Indigenous people don't need help. They need people to walk beside them and respect their truth and all the things that they know.
Thank you. I think it's wonderful that we're able to come together and celebrate the various aspects of our cultures and our gender identities as we meet together. In the United States, we of course struggle with the same things, and we're looking at an Equality Act in our National Congress that may help provide those rights that we need for everyone in the LGBTQ plus community. I'd like to thank you all for giving the time and being a part of the discussion today. And again, I am Representative Stephanie Byers, she, her, hers, member of the Chickasaw Nation, transgender woman, and representative here in the state of Kansas. Thank you all for this afternoon. Appreciate the discussion. I know I've learned a lot.
Sarame, ayo.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and panelists, for that enlightening conversation, important conversation with some hard truths about the state of Two-Spirit people in the region and the importance of embracing all cultures in our region. Es un gran placer para mí en este momento presentarles a Ana Lucía Riojas, que es nuestra moderadora, por un panel sobre un tema muy interesante, muy importante en nuestra región, y es la prohibición de las terapias de conversión. Entonces, en este momento, Ana Lucía Riojas.
Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo están todos y todas? Es un gusto para mí estar con ustedes en este evento para platicar de las mal llamadas terapias de conversión, estos esfuerzos que intentan corregir quiénes somos las personas LGBTI, desde algunos esfuerzos violentos y transgresores con nuestras mentes, nuestros cuerpos, y están con nosotros aquí para platicar sobre el contexto de sus países. Tenemos al senador canadiense René Cormier, muy bienvenido a usted. Tenemos a Iván Tagle de YAG México, el director ejecutivo de YAG México. Tenemos también desde Estados Unidos al congresista Sean Patrick Maloney, welcome. Y finalmente nos acompaña igualmente Anika Gray desde Jamaica. Yo estoy en Nico y les puedo contar que desde acá hay algunos esfuerzos que ya se han hecho notar en los congresos tanto federal como los distintos congresos locales para evitar y sancionar estas mal llamadas terapias de conversión. Ahora tenemos una iniciativa presentada en el Senado por la senadora Citlali Hernández Mora. Fue la primera iniciativa que presentó cuando ella entró a su legislatura. En este momento está todavía sin discutirse en el Pleno del Senado, pero esperamos que pronto sea igual en algunos otros estados de nuestro país. Algunos conservadores, de hecho, están ya siendo discutidas, presentadas y se está debatiendo la manera de abordar estos problemas que pues atacan nuestra dignidad, que van en contra de una vida libre de todas violencias para las personas LGBTI. Sin agregar muchas más cosas, vamos a pasar directamente a la conversación. Le doy la palabra, por favor, al senador René Cormier de Canadá para que nos cuente un poco del contexto de estas mal llamadas terapias de conversión en su país. Adelante.
Gracias, Lucia. Le Canada est une fédération composée de 10 provinces et 3 territoires, et bien que les pratiques de thérapie de conversion ne soient pas encore interdites au niveau fédéral via le code criminel, j'y reviendrai tout à l'heure là en vous présentant le projet de loi C6, plusieurs gouvernements provinciaux, territoriaux et municipaux ont déjà agi à ce sujet dans leur champ de compétences. 4 provinces et un territoire ont officiellement adopté des lois interdisant les pratiques de thérapie de conversion au Canada, l'Ontario, la Nouvelle-Écosse, l'île du Prince-Édouard, le Québec et le Yukon. Et bien qu'elles soient différentes, ces législations provinciales interdisent généralement aux professionnels de la santé réglementés de fournir des traitements ou des services visant à changer l'orientation sexuelle ou l'identité de genre d'une personne âgée de moins de 18 ou de 19 ans selon la législation. Règle générale, ces lois provinciales et territoriales protègent les mineurs, sauf dans certains cas s'ils sont considérés comme aptes à consentir à ces pratiques. Certaines juridictions protègent aussi les adultes, c'est notamment le cas du Québec et au Yukon sous certaines conditions. Ces 4 provinces et ce territoire interdisent aussi que ces pratiques soient considérées comme des soins de santé assurés au sens des régimes publics de santé. Au Canada, de nombreuses municipalités canadiennes ont utilisé les pouvoirs qui leur sont délégués par les provinces pour adopter des règlements administratifs afin d'interdire les pratiques de thérapie de conversion. Dans certains cas, les règlements interdisent aux entreprises situées sur le territoire de la municipalité d'offrir des pratiques de thérapie de conversion, d'en faire la publicité ou d'obtenir une rétribution en échange de telle thérapie. Et dans d'autres cas, le règlement est plus général et interdit aux entreprises d'offrir des pratiques de thérapie de conversion, qu'elles soient rémunérées ou non pour le faire. Il s'agit du modèle choisi par la municipalité d'Edmonton en Alberta, par exemple. Vous devez savoir que cette province n'a ni loi, ni projet de loi, ni politique pour bannir les pratiques de thérapie de conversion, et pourtant de nombreuses municipalités de cette province ont pris l'initiative de réglementer ces pratiques. On peut donc présumer que c'est sur la base d'une collaboration et d'une proximité entre des gouvernements municipaux, des organisations de la société civile et des citoyens militants si ces règlements ont été adoptés. En conclusion, force est de constater que ce sont les législations et les règlements de tous les paliers gouvernementaux, appuyés par des programmes de sensibilisation et d'éducation et par des actions militantes de la société civile, que nous réussirons à éradiquer ces pratiques dangereuses. Merci, thank you, gracias.
Muchas gracias, senador. Ahora vamos a escuchar al director ejecutivo de ILGA México, Iván Tagle, para que nos cuente un poco del contexto en México sobre las terapias de conversión.
Muchas gracias. Pues durante 2017, grupos religiosos conservadores establecieron como principal agenda la promoción e impartición de las terapias de conversión. En diversos casos, estos grupos fueron financiados por gobiernos y congresos locales, lo que impactó drásticamente en el aumento, por supuesto, de los casos de jóvenes que han sido sometidos a estos tratos crueles, inhumanos y denigrantes, y tenemos que decirlo así. Esos son. A partir de ahí, como organización, incidimos en las leyes propuestas actualmente para combatir las terapias de conversión, colocando al mismo tiempo una iniciativa a nivel local en la Ciudad de México y por supuesto a nivel federal con el apoyo de diversas senadoras con el fin de dividir a la oposición conservadora, logrando aprobar que la Ciudad de México fuera la primera entidad federativa en prohibir este tipo de esfuerzos para suprimir o reprimir la orientación sexual, identidad o expresión de género en nuestro país. En el contexto actual me permitiré hablar de 3 puntos importantes a considerar para contemplar el avance de las legislaciones que prohíben estos ecocid o estas terapias de conversión. El primero tiene que ver con la Constitución de 1857 en nuestro país, que establece la libertad de la religión siempre y cuando estas prácticas no constituyan un delito previsto en la ley. Es decir, la separación iglesia y Estado como concepto de laicidad es vital e importante para poder considerar las legislaciones propuestas tanto en la región como en los diversos países. El segundo punto, en 2003, nuestro país decretó una ley federal para prevenir la discriminación por preferencia sexual. Y el tercer punto, en 2011, se implementó una reforma constitucional que equipara los tratados internacionales ratificados por nuestro país en torno a los derechos humanos y los pone al mismo nivel que la constitución política de nuestro país. Sin embargo, estas leyes han sido insuficientes para cambiar la realidad y las dinámicas sociales, y me permitiré enunciar rápidamente 3 ejemplos no limitativos sobre el contexto en nuestro país y cómo fue que esto pudo avanzar. El primero, bueno, uno de los retos es que, por supuesto, durante el primer año de esta actual administración de gobierno se han registrado al menos 117 crímenes de odio hacia la población LGBTI, cifra alarmante porque es una de las más elevadas en los últimos 5 años, de acuerdo al informe de Letra S. Y por supuesto que uno de los problemas que enfrentamos en estas iniciativas es que México está siendo considerado como uno de los principales países con mayor índice de impunidad. Como bien decía, en 2003 habíamos aprobado.
Muchas gracias, Iván.
Para prevenir.
Vamos a pasar a escuchar ahora al congresista Sean Patrick Malone para que nos cuente un poco el contexto en Estados Unidos. Go ahead, Congressman.
In 29 states out of our 50 states in the United States, it is still legal to engage in conversion therapy for our LGBT youth. I have legislation in the Congress that would finally prohibit the use of federal funds to pay for conversion therapy. This is an outrageous practice that is tolerated because these services are considered medically necessary or are reimbursable, can be paid for by federal dollars through our Medicaid program. We know there are hundreds of thousands of people, often very young people in the United States. 700,000 is the number we believe have been subjected to conversion therapy, and we know this does lasting damage to our young people especially, and it's just a terrible practice. And so in this area, as in so many others, we have real work to do. We still lack employment protection in the United States at the federal level, which is remarkable given that we have a constitutionally protected right in the United States now to marry or to engage in intimate activity, and yet we can still be fired from our jobs or denied a hotel room or barred from other types of public services or accommodations under state law. And so while we have made great progress, both here and around the world, we have so much work to do. So it's an honor to be with you today. I look forward to the discussion, and I'm so proud of my colleagues who are on the panel today, who are working globally to advance the rights of LGBT people. I try to make it a priority wherever I go as a member of the House Intelligence Committee to prioritize meeting with LGBT activists around the world, often in situations where they are all alone and have really no structure, no funding, no support. They have only their own courage and their own dignity, and they are in the fight. And I'm proud to have stood with activists around the world.
That's right.
We're doing it right now, trying to hold the Turkish government accountable for its terrible LGBT policies. And we see, even in Europe, a trend that is very dangerous. And so we must all stand together and speak up, whether it's the issue of conversion therapy or of our equality more generally. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, congresista Sean Patrick Maloney. Ahora vamos a escuchar desde Jamaica a Anika Gray para que nos cuente un poco del contexto en el Caribe y en la región en la que ella vive. Adelante.
So thank you very much, Lucia. Now, in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean, colonial era laws criminalizing same-sex relations, aggressive lobbying from conservative religious groups, as well as the negative public attitudes towards LGBTQI people contribute to violence, discrimination, and harassment meted out to LGBTQI persons in our different countries. Now, the subjection of LGBTQI people to conversion therapy is one manifestation of this violence and harassment. And in a 2020 study done by Outright International in 17 Caribbean countries, 65% of the LGBTQI respondents reported that they had experienced conversion therapy. Now, most said they were forced into it at a very young age, but 42% indicated that they chose to engage in the practice due to profound societal and familial pressures to conform to expected gender norms. And all the respondents shared that conversion therapy was performed by religious leaders and sanctioned by family members who told them they had to be delivered from a gay demon. Now, in the end, there was no deliverance. Instead, the process left many LGBTQI people traumatized, some depressed, and quite a few suicidal. Now, one respondent that had undergone conversion therapy for 4 years, starting at age 15, highlighted the long-lasting impact of this type of violence on the LGBTQI community. And he said, and I quote, "I have to cry every time I recall that I lost 45 years of my life, ashamed of who I was. I chose to isolate myself and hide my true self because I felt so guilty of hurting my family. Alcohol was my escape, and alcoholism my punishment, even up to this day." Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Anika. Muchas gracias. Ha sido muy interesante escucharles a todas, a todos desde sus distintos países y el contexto que se vive. Hemos preparado algunas preguntas para que podamos platicar sobre opciones que tenemos frente a estas terapias de conversión desde nuestras distintas trincheras. La primera pregunta es para el senador René Cormier. ¿Cómo pueden los parlamentos y la sociedad civil trabajar juntos para moldear la opinión pública y castigar la terapia de conversión?
Thank you. The best way for me to address this question is to present you with Bill C6, an act to amend the criminal code conversion therapy, which was introduced in the House of Commons by the Government of Canada in October 2020. The tabling of this bill is the result of many steps taken by the LGBTQ2+ community and elected officials over several years, and it had been amended since it was introduced. So I will share with you today the state of the bill, including the proposed amendments, and I hope it won't be too technical. In the bill, conversion therapy is defined as a practice, treatment, or service designed to change a person's sexual orientation to heterosexual, to change a person's gender identity or gender expression to cisgender, or to repress or reduce non-heterosexual attraction or sexual behavior or non-cisgender gender expression. Specifically, the bill would prohibit causing a person to undergo conversion therapy without the person's consent, causing a child, in this case a person under 18 years old, to undergo conversion therapy, doing anything for the purpose of removing a child from Canada with the intention that the child undergo conversion therapy abroad, promoting or advertising an offer to provide conversion therapy, and receiving a financial or other material benefit from the provision of conversion therapy. So what are the main challenges facing Canadian legislators with this bill? First, the definition of conversion therapy in Bill C6 has raised many concerns about its scope. Some have argued that it would prohibit parents from having conversations with their children who are questioning their identity. Others argued that the only services that would remain legal would be those that accompany gender transition, and thus meaning we would be promoting transitioning. So in order to remove some uncertainty, the definition of conversion therapy was amended in the bill by adding the following, and I quote, "For greater certainty, this definition does not include a practice, treatment, or service that relates to the exploration and development of an integrated personal identity without favoring any particular sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression." Another challenge we're facing with the bill is linked to the following question: why don't Canada completely ban conversion therapy, regardless of the age of the person or their presumed consent? Well, the Canadian government states that this bill potentially engages the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, particularly in regard to freedom of religion, freedom of expression, the right to liberty and security, and the right to equality of individuals who may choose to receive or to provide conversion therapy. Therefore, the government has chosen to introduce the bill as written. That said, I must insist on the very limited space left by this bill for an adult to receive legally a conversion therapy, since it must be free of charge, without any advertisement or promotion, and an adult must provide a real consent. So as you can hear, we still have some barriers to overcome to ensure the passage of this bill. But considering the unwavering commitment of Canadian LGBTQ2+ organizations and the hard work of many parliamentarians, I am confident that Bill C6 will become law soon. Thank you. Merci. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, senador. Yeah. Muchas gracias, senador. Pues muy interesante escuchar lo que quiere decir desde Canadá. Ahora tenemos una pregunta también para el compañero Iván Tagle en México. La pregunta es, ¿qué lecciones podemos aprender de otros países sobre este tema, Iván?
Por supuesto, me parece que todas las iniciativas de leyes o las leyes ya propuestas son perfectibles, y en la medida en que nosotros estemos observando esas experiencias, podremos encontrar las áreas de oportunidad para erradicar precisamente este fenómeno, ¿no? Bien se estaba diciendo que uno de los principales problemas es la definición de las terapias de conversión. Desde México nosotros hablamos de esfuerzos para corregir o suprimir la orientación sexual o identidad de género, porque reconocemos que la mayoría de estas prácticas, que son tratos crueles, inhumanos y denigrantes, no necesariamente son implementadas por profesionales de la salud mental. Al contrario, las principales personas pueden ser incluso los mismos círculos familiares. En ese sentido, como comentaba en mi participación anterior, México es uno de los países con más altos índices de impunidad. Desde 2003 establecemos la discriminación como un delito. Sin embargo, hay 0 personas procesadas o no hay sentencia sobre ello. Entonces, me parece que en el mundo tenemos que ver estas iniciativas, este avance sobre este tema específico, como solo un banderazo de salida para poder implementar otras medidas precisamente para prevenir estos delitos, ¿no? Y para garantizar la no repetición. Me parece que en la medida en que intercambiemos buenas prácticas, es como podemos salir avante, ¿no? Reconozco completamente el apoyo que desde México nos ha brindado los los gobiernos de Estados Unidos y de Canadá para impulsar esta agenda, y eso ha implicado el que nos sentemos a intercambiar estas ideas, sobre todo de quienes hemos sido sobrevivientes de estas prácticas, que hay que decirlo, hemos sido nosotras y nosotros a través de nuestras experiencias, a través de nuestras voces, que hemos visibilizado el tema y que hemos incidido para que esto no vuelva a pasar. Por ello, será importante seguir manteniendo estas conversaciones, estos intercambios, no nada más en nuestro país, sino también en toda la región. Muchas gracias, diputada.
Muchísimas gracias, Iván. Y ahora tenemos una pregunta para el congresista Sean Patrick Maloney. La pregunta es la siguiente: ¿cuáles son las mejores vías legislativas para abordar este tema en Estados Unidos? Adelante.
Right. Well, look, I think the common theme that I've heard from Renee and others is the critical role that funding plays. And so our strategy legislatively is to take away the public subsidy, to take away the federal funds that are reimbursing for these services. If you do that, you take away the profit motive, and a lot of this will become just unworkable for the providers and for the families that would have to pay to subject their often children to these terrible practices. So I think the most effective strategy legislatively is to prohibit the taxpayer funding, the federal public funding of these barbaric practices. And if we do that, it will go a long way to accomplish what we all hope is a full abolition of these practices that are hurting so many people in our community.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Congressman. Now we have a question for Anika. I'll read it in Spanish. Anika, ¿qué consejos podemos tomar de la sociedad civil en su lucha?
So I wholeheartedly agree with what would have been stated by Renee, which is working towards that countries must work towards the criminalization of conversion therapy, especially in cases which involve children, that is those persons who are under the age of 18. And this is something CSOs in the Caribbean plan to use the current research from Outright International to lobby for. However, I do think that dealing with conversion therapy in the Caribbean also demands that we tackle wider legal, policy, and social conditions that give rise to the hatred and disdain for LGBTQI people in our societies. And to that end, civil society organizations in the Caribbean have been working tirelessly to change conditions on the ground by, one, challenging other discriminatory laws, such as we saw in the McEwen case in Guyana, or the Caleb Orozco case in Belize, the Richard Jones case, sodomy case in Trinidad and Tobago, and the Tomlinson case from Jamaica. So that's one thing. Secondly, the CSOs in the Caribbean have been working on sensitizing and educating the public on the need to respect the human rights of LGBTQI people. And most importantly, the CSOs have been providing a safe space for LGBTQI people who have been made to feel less than, or who have been made to not feel that they belong within the societies in which they were born. So yes, I do agree that CSOs will have to start working on lobbying for the criminalization of conversion therapy within the Caribbean, but we'll also have to understand that there has to be focus on the wider legal and policy environment that gives rise to the hatred and disdain for LGBTQI people.
Muchas gracias, Anika. Y bueno, hemos llegado al final de esta conversación. Ha sido muy, muy interesante escucharles a todos, a todas. Sin duda hay mucho trabajo por hacer para pues detener estas prácticas brutales y que pues le intentan restar dignidad y libertad a nuestras vidas en América y en toda la región del Caribe. Seguiremos trabajando desde nuestros distintos espacios. Yo estoy segura de que nos volveremos a encontrar porque compartimos esta lucha tan importante y tan digna por una vida libre de violencia y por eso, ¿no? Lo que significa la libertad, vivir sin miedo y como somos quienes somos. Muchas gracias a todas y todos por estar acá. Muchas gracias al Victory Institute por habernos invitado y haber provocado este espacio tan importante en estos tiempos.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to have listened to experts, civil society representatives, and lawmakers from across the region on issues that matter to all LGBT people and to all people who care about human rights. I think about the importance of authenticity. I think about listening to people who reflected on the need to have open dialogue and communication and to remember that at the end of the day, we're all people. Es muy importante saber que los derechos humanos son los derechos LGBTI y que falta luchar juntos para tener todos nuestros derechos. C'est vraiment quelque chose d'intéressant et fascinant juste de voir combien on peut apprendre en si peu de temps des personnes qui sont éloignées par la distance, mais pas par la technologie. Et c'est un message à tous les législateurs du monde qu'il faut travailler ensemble pour lutter, pour faire du changement et vraiment pour améliorer les vies des personnes LGBTI+ à travers le monde. Thank you to everyone who joined to watch this broadcast wherever you are in the world. The point of this event was to connect not just civil society advocates, but you with legislators to highlight the key challenges facing us in North America and the Caribbean. You have a voice and elected representatives have a vote. Now is the time to take action and make a change. Assurez-vous de nous suivre sur les réseaux sociaux et de vous abonner au site web alors que nous travaillons pour les événements législateurs pour l'égalité LGBT+, en Afrique et en Asie qui auront lieu ce printemps. Gracias de nuevo a nuestro equipo en Global Equality Caucus y en Google por hacer que estos eventos ocurrieran y un agradecimiento especial a nuestros socios en Victory Institute por el gran apoyo para encontrar personas excelentes para participar en este evento. Debate, connect, change. The power is in your hands to make this change take place. Thank you. See you next time.